I'm going to speak to Kevin Marsh, former editor of the Today programme. Morning, Kevin.
Good morning.
And also, first, I want to speak to Paul about this too. Radio 1, former Radio 1 DJ Paul Gambaccini at the time of Savile took part in last night's Panorama. Hi, Paul.
Good morning, Nicky.
Well, what a disgusting story this is. And, you know, you were there when he was there. I left when he left when I joined. And, you know, I had him like so many people had him as a kind of sexless eccentric. That was the image he portrayed. But you were there in the thick of it at the time. What were the rumours?
Well, you say in the thick of it, and I have to say that the floor plan of the building, which was known as Eighties House, had it such that I worked out of an office which was in between the office out of which John Peel worked and the office out of which Jimmy Savile worked. The Radio 1 DJs did not have their own offices. They worked out of their producers' offices. So even though Savile almost never came into the office because he didn't listen to new music, unlike John Peel, who was listening to new music next door all the time, nonetheless, the production assistants would come back from the program, Savile's Travels, which he would take his caravan out to record around the country, and we would hear stories. And, well, of course I would hear stories because I was next door for about 7 years, and I heard things, I guess some of which were now too politically incorrect to be included in last night's program. But
Well, what do you mean by that?
Well, the expression which I came to associate with Savile's sex partners was either one used by one of the production assistants or one that I made up to summarize their reports. I can't remember which was, but it was the now politically incorrect underage subnormals. In other words, he targeted the institutionalized, the hospitalized, and this was known. It's like the American bank robber Willie Sutton, who asked why he robbed banks, said that's where the money is. Why did Jimmy Savile go to hospitals? That's where the patients were. And it's something that it's easy to say everybody knew about it. Well, obviously not everybody knew about it. I couldn't help but know about it because I was next door. But you see, these episodes did not occur in the Radio 1 building. That's very important. Of all of these hundreds of accusations which have now come forward against Jimmy Savile, none of them so far occurred on Radio 1 premises, and that's because there was no private space. Unlike television, there's no dressing room.
But why wasn't this the talk of the town? Why wasn't this something done about it at the time? Are we just talking about a different standards in a different age, or what?
Well, we are talking about an era in which the subject of pedophilia was not discussed. It was considered so far beyond the pale that people didn't believe it happened. It was only in the 1980s, after AIDS had arrived and people became aware of the responsibility for the consequences of their own actions, that amongst the new areas of seriousness that people accepted was the reality of pedophilia. And I'm sure if you Googled the use of the word pedophilia in the media for the years of 70s and 80s, you would find that it picks up somewhere in the 1980s. But the story is not just the BBC, of course. It is...
But John Peel was dragged into this. The Mail was mentioning sort of some associations with teenage girls of John Peel and everything.
Let's forget about that, because that's another era. I mean, that's the 1960s was an era in which sexually precocious teenagers were considered exotic, desirable, and not scandalous. Consider the fact that, for example, Stanley Kubrick was acclaimed for his film Lolita, based on Nabokov's acclaimed novel, and this was about a precocious underage teenage girl. And similarly, songs like Young Girl got to #1. Nobody ever thought it was actually about pedophilia. It was just a kind of fantasy. And all of these...
But it was illegal then, and it's illegal now.
Yes, but what I'm saying is that at that time, throughout popular culture, and I mention these landmarks because they enable you to see that what Peel did was not considered shocking. And besides, in his case, the two women involved came back for more and were consenting. This is wholly separate from the Savile situation.
But lots of stuff is being conflated here, about all the
I
other...
know. And here's something which is really important. This is being built up by the right-wing press as if it only involves the BBC. It also involves the right-wing press. Why, 10 years ago, did a reporter from the Scottish Sun go around a wedding boasting that everybody at the Sun knew about the Savile necrophilia story? Was it because they did have a necrophilia story, or was it because people from the Sun just go around calling living celebrities necrophiliacs? There's a question to answer there. Why did the News of the World and the Sunday People, which knew about this decades ago, not act? And who vetted the knighthood? Coco the Clown? This is 1990.
That particularly lurid accusation that you've just brought to many people's attention is one that it's not been in the public domain.
I know that. Why not, News International? You have a case to answer. You see, the entire society was gulled by this man, including the Prime Minister who invited him to Chequers, including the royal family photographed with him. He got a knighthood in this country. He got a papal knighthood. This is not just the BBC. This is history. This is a man who conned an entire society, top to bottom, partly because in that era, that type of behavior was off the scale of human conception.
Well, it behoves me to say News International are not here to answer that particular allegation. But listen, Paul...
Listen, I'm not,
I've got to say that. I've got to say that. It's a legal thing.
Okay, it is a legal thing. I know. You asked me. I told you.
I know that.
But I'm not saying this in the spirit of vindictiveness against News International, with which I have a very nice relationship with Sky News, for example. I'm saying that many aspects of society have a contribution to make here. All of these aspects of society should come forward.
We're calling them for a response right now. Just before, Kevin, are you still there?
I am still here.
Sorry to keep
Fascinated,
you. Sorry to keep you. Paul, this program, Savile's Travels, which I remember listening to, this is like, there's so many people will feel this is nothing to those who were abused or of Savile's family, but so many people will feel sort of a part of their childhood growing up listening to the radio has been totally violated, knowing some of this. And I remember listening to Savile's Travels. What was Savile's Travels? What was that all about? It was, him and his producer went in a caravan up and down the country or something?
That's right. And interviewing people who were doing interesting things, and then the program would be edited. And Savile, as I say, almost never came into Radio 1 because by the time I got there in 1973, he had transcended us all and started concentrating on television. So he would only go into Broadcasting House about once a month to record his links for a few programs at one time.
He didn't even play the records, did he?
He did not play the records. To my astonishment, I just learned that he never learned how to run the board. Can you believe this? The leading DJ of the period didn't know how to run the equipment. That's mind-blowing. But anyway, he had gone off to television, beginning with Clunk Click, and then after 2 years of that, Jim will Fix It. And so he was concentrating on his television image and getting in good with the establishment, which was one of his goals. He reminded us many times that he was a member of Mensa, the high IQ society. In other words, that he was smarter than us. And he used that genius in a variety of ways, one of which was to rise higher in the establishment than any of us ever did, and also, of course, to conduct his life of self-gratification. You may wonder, why did Paul bother to go on Daybreak a couple of weeks ago and talk about this? What was in it for him? Obviously, there's nothing in it for me.
No.
But just the fact that I was there, next door to that office for a number of years, and I saw and heard things, and I saw and heard things in the broader society, what was going on in the society as a whole that enabled this man to affect ascend on a historic scale and rise to the very top of the society. This is history. This is not just about emails at Newsnight, although that is part of the story.
Okay, listen, you're always, I always, and I've got a great admiration for you, Paul, because you always are very forthright. Thank you very much for talking.
Okay.
Rachel's, you're looking puzzled about something.
Well, I'm still confused about why you did not say anything.
How can you tell something to someone who already knows? Remember, I was not present at the offences.
No, but you heard about them. You've just said you heard about them. You know,
yes, that's
time
right.
after time.
I heard about them.
Why did you not go to the? Why did you not go to the police?
Well, first of all, Savile had already bribed some policemen. So
What?
This was something that it is pretty widely known. Not in London, but up in Leeds. And on page 51 of his autobiography, there's that story about when, after he'd spent a night with a girl that he'd rescued, a girl on remand, as his reward, he spent the night with her, and he took her in to a policewoman and said, "Don't nick me, because if you do, I'll bring down half the station house." It's in his autobiography. The amazing thing about Savile is he hid in plain sight. If you watched that show last night and you saw him being affectionate with younger people, your skin probably squirmed knowing what you know now. Well, he said things which gave the game away, but nobody put two and two together because society was not yet ready to do the addition.
Okay, Paul, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.